The strongest military power on earth is China. And after that is Russia. And only after that, the United States. But the Chinese are sitting quietly and they don't show what they have. The only time they show it is at their military parade. The kind of high tech they have is unbelievable. Even without nuclear. This is why when I hear all these talk about nuclear, I laugh. Because Russia doesn't need nuclear. Russia can, with conventional weapons, win entire NATO now, even including the United States.
Welcome back to Neutrality Studies, everybody. Today, for the first time, with Dr. Vladimir Brovkin, a Russian-born American historian and former associate professor at Harvard University, and the author of several books, his latest one being Russia in Search of Its Identity, From Vladimir Lenin to Vladimir Putin. He's also the host of a very insightful YouTube channel called History and Politics with Dr. Brovkin. Vladimir, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Pascal. Very, very happy to be at your channel, which is really about neutrality and really about not taking sides, but being objective and balanced. And I always follow you. Thank you.
Where are we at in the West's relationship with Russia?
The relations with the United States, I think, are much more dangerous than with Europe. Because in the United States, the Republican Party, all of the Democratic Party hate Russia. The elites hate Russia. The Jewish elites hate Russia. And a lot of war hawks in the Republican Party hate Russia. And hate Russia in a sense that they feel we're number one. We can do anything. Trump keeps repeating they're the strongest power. They're not the strongest power anymore. But they keep, deceiving themselves that they are. The strongest military power on earth is China. And after that is Russia. And only after that, the United States. But the Chinese are sitting quietly and they don't show what they have. The only time they show it is at their military parade. The kind of high tech they have is unbelievable. So anyway, why it is dangerous with the United States is because Trump is holding them back, trying to talk to Putin, trying to, pretend as if there's some kind of a normalization. There isn't any normalization. But what happens after Trump is totally unpredictable. And it may be, a small crisis could escalate quickly over Cuba, over Venezuela. It's only the patience of Vladimir Putin that saved the world from another Cuban Missile Crisis. And anyone over Iran. These are three that could ignite at any moment. Because all three are Russia's allies, and it's only the patience of Putin that keeps them down at the manageable level.
This is quite interesting. Your analysis is quite different from that I've heard also from a couple of European colleagues who are maybe too much focused actually on what they hear in their day-to-day news consumption from their elites. And, we've seen over the last couple of years how Russia has been very much willing, over the last 2 years, 1.5 of the Trump administration, how they've been very much willing to engage with the Americans, and the Americans been willing to engage with the Russians, which is completely different for Europe, right? Europe on a political level has basically been trying for the last 4 years to completely just kill Russia with silence, as the Japanese would say. But your interpretation then is that overall Russia is looking at kind of a natural regime change in Europe via the election cycle, and get Europe back together like that. That's why we are seeing so much restraint from Vladimir Putin toward Europe. But on the other hand, with the United States, it's really dangerous. So is it Trump that keeps the lid on, or is the Russophobia is Russophobia necessarily going to somehow lead to another round of escalation with the United States?
Yes, Trump is keeping a lid down, and that's probably the best thing that he has done with all the many other awful things that he's done. But you see, I want to, put places where they are, put the emphasis where the Russians are not trying to, they don't hope that relations go back to the way they were before 2014. The divorce between, I wrote that in my book, the divorce between Europe and Russia is for a long time. It's a serious one. It's political, it's cultural, it's economic. Russia did already make a pivot to the East. So they're very, very close relations with China, and Putin is maintaining this incredible balancing act with India and with Indonesia and ASEAN countries, great relations with just about all of them in Southeast Asia. So economically, Russia has turned away from Europe, but it doesn't want to fight Europe. And it doesn't want to be friends with Europe. Russia now can take on the entire NATO, I think, and win. This is how powerful Russia is. And people don't really understand how powerful Russia is. Even without nuclear. This is why when I hear all these talk about nuclear, I laugh, because Russia doesn't need nuclear. Russia can, with conventional weapons, win entire NATO now, even including the United States. Because here's the point. Russia is very big, and to destroy Russia's industrial capacity is just about very difficult, if not impossible, because you would need to, if it's not nuclear, you would have to have a whole lot of bombs and Storm Shadows and others, and then there are the S-400 that would intercept them, and then this spread over huge territory. That Europe is much more compact, much more compact, and so to destroy, military potential of Germany is actually quite easy, because it's all pretty much concentrated in a relatively small geographic area. So in that sense, I think that they're playing with fire. As I said, the only problem is what is going to happen in the United States. A lot depends whether Trump wins or loses November elections. If he loses, he's a lame duck president, but he's still president, so all the Democrats could do is just sabotage his initiatives, but they cannot do their own policy. Suppose they vote another $100 billion to Ukraine. Well, he can veto it, and that's it. There's no way they can override it. So for the next 2 years, there's not going to be, a major U.S. involvement. Another, as the political scientists say, variable or unpredictable is what is going to happen with Iran. Is Trump going to be foolish enough to launch a full-scale invasion? Well, my view is if he does, the United States would lose, and would lose not only that, but lose its power status as a great power. It's just simply impossible to win over Iran, simply because to win, you have to invade. To invade, you have to have a 2 million army and with all the logistic supports, and you have to occupy. That you cannot just parachute, one division and take over Tehran. It's not going to work, because they're going to surround it and kill them all. So to win militarily and have a regime change is just about impossible for the United States. And then they have to swallow the pill and accept some kind of compromise. But judging by the rhetoric and the injured pride of Trump and his entire elite, that's not likely. They're not just going to swallow it. They're going to keep fighting one way or another, and that means the conflict would continue, and that means that they're not going to get involved with Russia, because they're not foolish enough to get into 2 wars at the same time. See, the problem with American elites, I think, they overestimate the power of America. They really think that they are as they were 50 years ago. Number one, when times are changing, China is a superpower now. It was not just when Putin took power in 1999. It was just industrializing third world country, just getting its population fed. They could not challenge U.S. in robotics and in arms and in missiles and in everything militarily. They could not anywhere close to it. Now they can. So the American elites and they don't understand it. They really are comforted by Trump saying, we're number one, we're the greatest power, we're this, we're that. Well, it's very hard for them to say, sorry guys, you're not. And nobody wants to say it, because that's not the popular message. What are you going to gain by saying something like this? I say it, and I see that people don't like to hear this. When I look at the number of clicks and how my videos are doing, each time I say America is not number one, it just goes down. People don't want to hear it, but that's the truth, and that's the historical reality. But what I'm trying to say is that the politics in the United States is unpredictable. One way may win, the other may win, or if the Republican Party splits, then the Democrats may win in the next presidential cycle. And that is also not clear which kind of Democrats, the leftists, the socialist types, or the super conservative hawks like Biden. So US politics is quite interesting because it is still unpredictable. There's still many different ways it can go in the next 2 years. And it is for this reason, I think, that that Putin is going to maintain this facade of good relations with Trump. And it is a facade. Putin is clever enough to understand you cannot trust Trump. You cannot trust any of those Western leaders. But you have to, make it look like we're talking about possible this and possible that, as long as it doesn't lead to a big war. That's it.
I mean, I found it very interesting how you described the strategy of Vladimir Putin, and how the faster advance now is basically the answer to the strikes. Because this, to me, if I had to boil it down, what you said would mean that the current Russian leadership is kind of marrying two strategies. One is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So if they keep firing at us, we're just going to figure out how to intercept the drones and everything, and we do that. While at the same time, you're doing hide your strength and bide your time. As in, we just gonna continue vamping up our industrial capacity and make sure that if ever push comes to shove, we can then have overwhelming force. And if the Europeans want to underestimate us, go ahead, underestimate, and continue doing that, because you're undermining yourself.
Yes, exactly. Moreover, this is exactly as you say, because I've heard from some of the discussions that the Russians are now putting a lot of effort into multiplying the production of Oreshnik missiles and all kinds of other hypersonic missiles, so that. And this is one of the biggest advantages of Russia over the United States and over the West, Western manufacturers. Let me explain it like this. Everybody knows American missiles are super expensive. One Storm Shadow, last time I checked, is $2.5 million. Why are they so expensive? Well, they're so expensive because everything is expensive. Labor is expensive, taxes are high. And this is why American missiles, this is the Achilles heel of the United States, is that their weapons are so expensive. And they're expensive because it's a huge markup, because it's not really a capitalist economy where the cheapest and the best gets the order. From that point of view, I've been saying it all along. American military industry is Soviet industry. In other words, there's one producer and one owner. This is the United States government. There's no competition, and the US Congress is willing to pay anything. They say upfront, we want the best, we'll pay anything it costs. And this is why they drove up their prices to a point where it becomes impossible to have mass production. This is why there's a crisis of Patriot missiles, because it's just too expensive to produce them, and because they don't want to produce them en masse, because if they do, they'll become cheaper. But their purpose is not to arm their homeland for a patriotic fight against all its enemies. Their purpose is to make money, and that is the problem. Whereas in Russia, it is very much not the kind of capitalism that is in the West. It is very much like, I call it, the Russian traditional political economic system, which is the same as under Peter the Great. Peter says, we need a factory here, and it's built, regardless of whatever it takes or whatever it costs. And then Peter says, we need the fleet. And then the Russians built the fleet and beat the Swedes. And that's the same thing now. Putin says, we need mass production of Oreshniks. You do it. And then Medvedev is in charge, and they're going to do it. That's the way it works. And therefore, in both cases, cost doesn't matter. But in American case, cost doesn't matter because they want to make a lot of money. In Russia, cost doesn't matter because they want to make a lot of missiles, regardless of the effort. That's the difference. But let me give you just two examples. As you spoke, I thought of those. And I often cite this one. The F-35 fighter jet, I think it sells on the world markets for $135 million. Now, if you look at Su-57, which is the best Russian aircraft, which is comparable, some people say better, but at least it's in the same class. It sells to India for $35 million. 35 versus 135. So that just shows you that Russians can produce equally good or better equipment for a fraction of the price. Now, Trump himself said that America doesn't make shipyards anymore, doesn't make any ships. They have to revive those. Now, Russia has finished several first-class submarine nuclear submarines in the last couple of years, and they keep building ships. One of the shipyards is in St. Petersburg, another one in Vladivostok. So Russia is producing very, very modern, very advanced weaponry, ships and missiles and aircraft and so on. So from that point of view, militarily, Russia is absolutely confident that it can take on anybody and win. Now, but getting back to Ukraine, how that translates, this is a very important point, that Russia cannot fight the war in Ukraine the way that the Israelis fought it in Gaza. They cannot fight it the way they fought the Germans, or the way the Americans fought the Germans. They just bombed the hell out of Germany. Every time you travel in Germany, I'm sure you know that there are pictures in the city hall of what Germany looked like in 1945. I studied in a University of Tübingen, not far from Stuttgart. There was not one building standing in Stuttgart in 1945. All of it was bombed out by Royal Air Force and by the Americans. So the Russians cannot bomb the way they do. Despite the pictures that are shown today on TV, if the Russians sent 600 missiles and drones on Kiev and 20 people died, that means they're terribly ineffective, because that's less than one person per missile. They hit military infrastructure. They hit it at night. If they wanted to kill as many Ukrainian workers, they would have hit it during the day. They hit it at night so that they destroy military capacity of Ukraine to wage war. This is what Putin is doing. That shows to me two things, and this is from his latest speech. Russia does not want to occupy and incorporate all of Ukraine. They don't want these neo-Nazi, Azov types, Bandera types, the Russian citizens. They don't. What they want, I think, and this is my interpretation, reading Putin's mind, is that they want to liberate, as they would put it, Novorossiya. That is from Odessa, bordering on Ukraine and on Romania and Moldova, and all the way to the north, minimum Kharkov, but possibly Poltava and Sumy. The rest of it would be Ukraine, but the kind of Ukraine that would be, kind of like a Russian protectorate. They will not be a Russian federation, but they would not be a member of NATO. They would not be a member of European Union, which is the same thing. That they would be neutral, and they would be monitored. And if they, venture to violate anything, they will just occupy the rest of it and install their own government, just like Americans did numerous times in Latin America.
So on my channel, other people have compared the situation also to how Russia fought the war in Chechnya, and in the end ended up with Chechnya, of course, still being part of the Russian Federation, but basically run by, by proxy, by what's his name, the Chechen leader, Kadyrov is run by Kadyrov, which is basically, doing the bidding of the central government, and the Moscow is fine with that. So in analogy, you would say, like, okay, there's still a part of Ukraine that Moscow, that Vladimir Putin and so on aims at incorporating fully into the Russian Federation in order also to consolidate, and that is manageable because the people there are sympathetic to Russia. On the other hand, the ones that are not sympathetic, you keep them over there, they're externalized, but probably under some form of Ukrainian Kadyrov type, who then will make sure that it remains independent but not a threat anymore, and then call it a day at that point.
Yes, I think so. This is something that is there's still versions of the plan possible. It could also be when I listen to the Ukrainians, emigres or refugees who used to be members of government in Ukraine before 2014. When you listen to them, and they're quite vocal on Russian media shows, what they want is Ukraine like Belarus, that they are like unified state with Russia, like Belarus, but they are still separate in terms of culture, in terms of even their currency, in terms of their domestic policies, so that the foreign policy is Russia controlled or doesn't exist at all. But then they do have local, autonomy, like Belarus does, with open borders and normal relations with Russia. This is what they would like, is the kind of a status that Ukraine survives as an internationally recognized entity, a country like Belarus is, but at the same time, it is closely allied to Russia. So this is their idea. One thing that is quite interesting in this regard is what happens to Western Ukraine, Lvov area, because this is the hotbed of a Bandera movement. And Putin said many times they don't want them in Russia. And the question is whether it would be a part of Ukraine or whether they would make it a separate territory. And then what happens with Hungarian, Romanian, and Polish minorities in that area? So kind of interesting to watch. Some speculate that the Hungarians might want to take back. It's a very small area. It's minuscule, but nevertheless, there's 500,000 Hungarians who live there. And in Chernovtsi, it used to belong to Romania. So this is interesting how they're going to what is going to happen in that area. Is certainly not a part of the Russian Federation, but whether they're going to carve it up or make a separate state out of it, I don't know. But all of this talk, let me emphasize, Pascal, Russia is going to win this war. It's just a matter of what form it would be afterwards, and in relations to different parts of Ukraine and in relations to the Europeans.
One more fun fact on the side: history is not finished. Not only do we get new history every day, we also have a lot of not uncovered history yet. It fascinates me, and I'm telling you just because it's really fascinating that the Soviets have had a embassy in Japan the whole time, because they were, of course, neutral until the 9th of August, and nobody ever worked on that. Nobody, not the Russians, nobody outside, nobody knows what the Soviet diplomats did inside Japan between 41 to 45. It's fascinating. So there's still a lot of work to be done in the archives, and you're the right person to follow also on those. So Vladimir Brovkin, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Pascal.
大家好，我是主播周玉琴。很多的朋友告诉我们，选择原版的太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌，它添加有羽衣甘蓝，健康再加分。而有睡眠困扰的朋友们，赶快选择蓝色包装这一款晚安加强版，绝对是更有感。每日克菲尔，时刻美好 ，Good Feel Good， 请上快点购为健康下单，而且要记得输入推荐代码，有额外的折扣优惠。太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌基础版、晚安加强版新包装改版，内容不变，抽取更方便。要吃就吃最好的。